Ķukaya yuxatini shtakat yuan. Akwan hasa anikachwe kanachaya ayakawadan yayaki gleit qatlan. Achtu yakayatat. Wan qanins jake genki hlitziqwa ataqukhu. Kwalchakuksa awe yohan nachtuwasaku. Ituwu ayakanachwe kabduwaga. Ye awe klingit yukatangi kanachwe katlan. So katlan kanachaya. Kakanachawe ajitas awati kakanachiki at hastu kage yesawe hatachkankiyan wuchine chikachtune chikaikiyachawe ohan yaha yukatangiti hatakanucho aya hata yehas nakya yitat wasa haste tawasagu yautu wadlaki ajawe kakachtu ak wuchin Ketlach to oshko ya tu o ya chaklay na kaya ya iti acho yin kachanika yitat chaklay kiya kawe ohan ujin khasati ya hayijne yitin to ya kik dawe klidzi aya at ig wujin khoa wujin atukhayi khilziden qone aya ya nallet Lingít yagu. Yewa hatu tiya yidat gulchish. Thanks everybody. I'm really happy that we're together. I want to make sure you folks all know that I never want you to feel like you're by yourself with any of this stuff. For one person to like paddle a boat, it's hard. There's even this guy's own verb. You gotta paddle on this side, paddle on that side. But when people paddle together, you really get that canoe to glide. Again, the shit, that's what you say, that canoe is just gliding across the water. And so we're going to start by talking about some of the work that we're doing to close out this semester, which includes dealing with calendar errors. I didn't write that calendar very carefully. I had a whole extra week. And I told another class, I did it in every class I taught this semester. So I've been telling the other classes, like, I know you guys would just hang out for a whole extra week, but I can't ask you to do that. So we are going to adjust our schedule. I got to plug in my computer. But some of the things that I was thinking about is we were given a wonderful thing from our ancestors. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we give that same thing to the future generations. That means, you know, like here on the land of the Ḳukaháa people, it's really snowing hard. Snow's getting deep. It's nice, I like it. But it gets a little difficult sometimes to drive around. And our language too. There's deep parts of the language. You know, there's this, one of these, I gave you this set of stories to look at. One of them has this word eat in it, which is a halibut hole. And that's like where the halibut like to live. Real deep part of the ocean. And that's sometimes where we're going to go with this language. But we're doing all this stuff together. Sometimes it's going to get difficult. But we're here. We're here together to help each other out. So to kind of recap what we're going to work on having by next Tuesday. Well, actually, we're going to go over this stuff next Tuesday. We're going to start really sort of going through it. And like this translation exercise is not a graded thing, right? So don't feel like if you don't translate all the things that you get a bad grade. But also don't like just coast along, right? Just do what you can, but this is really hard work. This is where translation work is some of the hardest stuff that you can do, and also dealing with, you know, I feel like beginning Lingít, intermediate Lingít. We do a whole bunch with kind of little chunks of language. Here's this little thing, here's this little thing. And here, look at this gigantic, and then we sort of pull out the gigantic things every now and then. Because the old masters and the masters of today do wonderful things with Lingít. And one of my goals is to make sure that we can all do that same kind of stuff. So there's a couple things that you folks are going to do. So this is tlingitlanguage.com, under Learning Tlingit and Intermediate Tlingit. When you scroll down, there's like a whole bunch of texts that we sort of use to go through and do our work. You should be familiar with all of this stuff. Then I did add, I think I added something on here. Let's see. No, I didn't. Okay, I got to put it on. I put it in other places. So there is a typed up version of these Tlingit verb notes, which is very handy. So I'll make sure that I show you folks where you could find that. Let's see. If you go down, and this is where our class kind of starts, and kind of up towards the front, I had put some things here. Oh, here they are. Okay. So here's some things to know. One is this is a folder that has everything that I've ever created and collected for Lingít. If you want to go crazy over the break, take a deep dive, like just start wandering through this thing. Lots of stuff is there. Check out the work by James Crippen. Check out the work by Seth Cable if you really want to nerd out on some of the linguistic stuff. There's also, this is Tlingit verb notes. So sometimes we'll take a look at this document. Let's see if I have it open. Yeah, I think I do. So this document sometimes we'll take a look at. If you're looking for a verb and you can't find it, you could usually find it in here. So these are Tlingit verb notes. It's all handwritten, which I think is really cool, but sometimes it can be a little difficult to find things. There is navigation on here. So if you go to the left, or whatever your PDF sort of viewer is, you can like look at the S, and these are verb roots. So ones that start with, so you can say sa, like breathe or live or name. So then you can click on this, and it usually does take you like one page in front of where you need to be. So sometimes you got to back up. But then here's where you see like ye ayasak, which is, we know this as you do a sock a lot of times when we introduce ourselves, but this is where you could find that verb. And you can just sort of browse through this thing and just like see the depth of Tlingit verbs. There's thousands of them. But sometimes it is a little bit faded, a little bit hard to read. So we do have a version of it that's typed, thanks to Ďechtúchtlá, who typed it up for us. So a few years ago, we're finishing spring semester, and she had asked, like, is there something I could do over the summer to keep me busy, keep me in the language? I said, well, we got this 860-page thing with mostly handwritten notes. You want to type it up? She said, oh, yeah, sure. So she typed it up. That's amazing. So if you go, like, we'll just take a look at the PDF version. So here's Pages, Word, PDF. So if you click on that, so this is what you've got now. So now this is in the same order. It's not by page, but it just goes through every verb is basically an entry here. So you can come in and see Ďechtúchtlá. Oh, that's so blurry. But when you download it, it won't be blurry like this. It's probably still loading. Let's see. So that's good to know. It's good to have, and it's also searchable. And if you're using the Crippen keyboard, or I think the Language Geek keyboard would work as well, you could search for things with underlines and stuff. Similar, this is a list of nouns, and so this includes nouns that are not in the current version of the dictionary I've been working on. So if you can't find a noun, you can also look in here, and you might be able to find it. We have asked I have asked you folks to share sentences throughout the semester. So I was like, go write 5 sentences about birds, go write 10 sentences about a mountaintop, go write sentences about residential schools, go write sentences about friendship and kinship. So whatever you have done, I would like you to enter that into a Google Sheet on here. So when you click on here, this should take you to a sheet, and we should see your name down here, and just put your sentences there, and put the translation. And I will be giving you some notes, probably over the course of next week and maybe even into the winter break. We'll see how things go along. But I'll just sort of write some notes in there, and we can have a dialogue about it if you want to, just to sort of continue to sort of fine-tune your sentence how you put sentences together. If there's things we need to work on. Then the last thing is this document, Lingít Short Stories, which looks like this. It's a collection of stories that are written in Lingít and not in English, and your goal is to retype them and then to translate them. So on this spreadsheet here, everyone has signed up for a spot, so you should see your name on here with a story that you're working on. As far as what the template looks like, let's see. So just go one sentence at a time and put the Lingít here and then the English here. And you should be able to just download this directly. Let me know if you're having any problems with these templates. You should be able to just open it in Google Documents. And for some of them, like even though you might have little things like if it says ye adayaqa klaik or something like that. So ye adayaqa klaik would probably be the first sentence. Then the next sentence should start with kleshachji, right? But just do your best, and we will go over these on Tuesday. There was a question before we started about a ridicule poll, and I'll share with you folks what I know, which isn't a whole lot. But this would be different than like how a totem pole would be raised. So a totem pole is usually raised, and there's a whole bunch of people there, and it's a big celebration. When a ridicule pole went up, this is from something called kadeir. So kadeir means shame. And so sometimes, like especially, let's say, well, let's just set up a scenario, okay? Let's say there's a clan, and they have their land, and there's someone who comes over from another clan's land and goes fishing, and he didn't ask the clan whose land it is if he could do that, and there wasn't any sort of prearranged deal. It's not something he does all the time or they do all the time. So the clan catches that person. They say, hey, you never asked us. We would have told you yes, but now you got to pay because you didn't respect us, so you're going to give us half the fish that you caught. And that's what this person said. No, I'm not going to do that. It just takes off, right? So by Lingít law, haqusti, the person who took the fish without asking from their land now has a debt. The debt must be paid. So what they would probably do is have the clan leaders go to they would identify who that was, and then go to his clan and say, or their clan, and say, hey, we gotta settle this. Y'all gotta pay. Because Lingít, the way things go is like whatever you do, your whole clan does, right? So you go mess around, mess something up, your whole clan probably had to pay. When we were taught Lingít, like this is why folks like Ḳukaháa, Evelyn Hodge used to tell us, if you don't know those people, you can't just talk any old way. You can't make all the nasty jokes and all the stuff you guys like to do sometimes. She liked to do that kind of stuff too. But she say you gotta act right, because you might insult them. You might make some silly comment and just insult them, and now your whole clan's gonna have to pay for that. So they'd probably go to the clan, and then if they couldn't settle it there, like usually they would, like usually the clan would just say, oh, what are we doing? And then they would pay, they would negotiate some kind of settlement, and then that person be in all kinds of trouble. But if it couldn't get resolved, like maybe they said, well, this person's always doing that. We're tired of bailing them out. So you guys do what you gotta do. So in this kind of scenario, what they would do is they would carve a whole totem pole, put an image of this person on there, make fun of them. It's not an honoring thing at all. They'd probably have them in the act. I've seen ones with no mouth on them. Sometimes there's no mouth, like, especially someone maybe who's talking out of, telling stuff they shouldn't. You'd be like, shut your mouth. So this pole goes up to embarrass that person, make fun of them. And then tell everybody, oh yeah, that person's a thief. come over here, take fish out of our land. Watch out for them. So their reputation's getting tarnished. So that's the sort of the way this thing kind of works. However, if the person showed up and said, okay, because they'd probably put his clan on there too. They put the clan on there. They do all kinds of stuff, and it'd be bad. So maybe this person shows up, says, okay, when I was here, I got 20 fish, and you folks said you want half of them. So here's 10 fish, and here's another 10, because I really should have paid you, and I'm sorry. And like this should probably be a fairly public type of thing. Like usually they would say, okay, you better bring your clan over here and host a party and give us those. Don't just hand us those 20 fish. You come throw us a party, and you feed us and entertain us, and then you stand up in front of everybody and say how bad you were, how sorry you are, and give us those fish in front of everybody. So, but whatever they negotiated to, this whole process is called Conclusive, the peacemaking process. And it could be for little things, big things, medium things, people dying, all kinds of stuff, people breaking masks and stuff. But a part of that ceremony would be, okay, made your apologies, corrected this, gave us the fish, we appreciate it. We're going to burn this ridicule pole, and we'll never talk about this again. But that was like, some people do sort of try to appropriate different portions of this to today. A few years ago, someone was really insulting people, and then they gave that person an opportunity to make a public apology, and they did a bad job of that. Basically stood up and said, well, you just didn't understand what I said. I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is where you say, I am sorry, I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings. Like, just basics of an apology, right? And so they said, well, there was the peacemaking process, and a bunch of us said, no. Like, it's a negotiation. It's not just someone saying that something happened. So there were always clans involved with this stuff, and so like the individual was never just one person. Like you'd represent your whole clan. But once everybody decided it was good, then yeah, like even, because then there could be something else. Like it could be 10 years later, and someone's telling a joke, hey, remember that person came over here and stole fish, had to pay? Like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to talk about that. That was settled, right? So then that person might get in trouble, right? So, but this is like when we get into this story, and this story, these are really short stories. They're full of really big chunks of language, including very difficult stuff. I almost feel bad. I do feel a little bad. But also it's fun because what you folks are doing and what we're doing collectively gives us a really wonderful resource. And make sure that all the work that went into this doesn't just go kawayikt. So kawayikt means out into the space. And we don't want this stuff to get lost. And so we're going to actually be teaching folks from this well into the future. So with that, any thoughts, questions, things that you want clarification on with the work that you're doing on this big project? Or just thoughts?
Definitely tough to track some of the verbs down, and have to take breaks. You can find things easily, and other things it's definitely some work, more than I thought it would be. Like, oh cool, that's not many sentences.
Oh boy, yeah.
Makes it tired. Makes it tired. Next semester we'll have some easier stuff to do.
I don't know that I would be lobbying for easier stuff. I think one of the things that I'm appreciating about it is that it is so hard, and it really causes a real stretch of exercise. I think one of the things, it's a generalized comment, but as I have translated through my story, I just basically did it in a Pages document where they were kind of like tabbed out word and translation, and then I'll put them into the template. But the sentences don't make any sense at all. So I mean, they do and they don't. I think I think maybe it will come with time where we understand how, even though I know that we've got the subject object reversal type situation and other things like that, just how to make that translation, not the literal parallel word for word, but then into proper sentence structure and maybe some of the nuances that might be interjected.
Yeah, there is this third, there's kind of this third language or this in-between space where you're going to find yourselves for quite a while. And what the advanced students are doing is listening to a recording that doesn't have anything written. And then they're writing down what the speaker's saying and translating it. So it's a similar thing. They're just running into, you run into undocumented words, you'll run into stuff that's kind of hard to find. But then also, like, once you get some of these, like, oh man, I remember when like I ran into that thing, I couldn't figure out what it was, but then you almost have to have like a three-column translation where, like, here's the word for word thing, and then here's how you'd put it into English, because English needs a lot more reference points and just other things. Like Lingít does an awful lot, which is sort of like, we'll just use all third person pronouns and somehow like it's not, the bear didn't break the thing, the guy fell on it and it broke, right? But then sometimes as you're doing this stuff too, you sort of go through and you start translating it. Then as you get further, you're like, oh, okay, and then it starts to kind of make sense. And the more you do this work, the more it sort of begins to reveal the Tlingit thought world, which is where we start getting into the deep waters, where it's like, yeah, well, we've been doing this word by word, phrase by phrase thing, but now let's look at what the whole language looks like, and it's a big, huge thing, and it's really fun, but also some of these stories are they're pretty rough. It's like just some sad stories.
I'm wondering, there were parts I'd like to have people said that, the sentences were like, whoa, I got this one. And then other ones that I have spent a lot of time and haven't unlocked. But is it in part of storytelling that there's a lot of repetition? Because I feel like all of a sudden it's like they went there and moved along it, and then they went there and were moving, with the preposition, and it seemed very repetitive in one spot. Is that part of the storytelling style?
Yeah, so sometimes you'll see like they'll say either the exact same thing over, sometimes just right in a row, or sometimes they'll be talking and then they'll go back to this sort of moment. So I think there's a couple things. One is they're not always linear. So like they'll tell you this story. It's like, okay, this one time these people did this. And then you don't even get like a real transition point. You're just sort of all of a sudden you're like, okay, we just backed up to like when they started doing this type of thing. And so just sort of like, I think the more you sort of go in between these two languages, you start to put some of those things together and you start to see there is, whenever you move into stories, like I think there's a future where there's probably two big documents, which is the stories we learn from and the conversations we learn from. And the conversations move faster, like they just have less, sometimes requirements. And so some of the requirements for storytelling is often using these really, like whenever you want to do something like every time this happens, or whenever this happens, or when this happened, or after it happened, whenever you're going to start tying some things together, like it's going to get really big, or some other things like couldn't do anything about it. Like that's a really hard thing to say in Tlingit. And so in conversation, you get some of that stuff, but you don't have some of the formalities. So with storytelling, you tend to have some of these formalities. Oh, okay. So we're going to look up a couple of verbs that we've got in here. So a couple of things when you're looking at a verb like chikkitakut, there's a couple of things that you're going to learn how to do. And one is, let me actually, share a screen with you folks. So I made this document that's just called like notes. So I can start putting some notes together and then have them in one place that we can just share them. So the question is like with this verb. So, whoops. So there's a couple of things. One is being able to sort of find a couple of things. Like I would say, let's start by breaking this into three things. And then this is the classifier and the root. And this is the conjugation. And this is the noun that you could put onto a verb. So the noun that you could put onto a verb is hand, right? So j has to do with hands. This K underline GI, kqi. Does anybody know what that is?
The future tense.
Sure.
Yes, so this is a future tense for you are going to. So this kqi it's always going to be you are going to. So it's a second person subject in the future. So you are going to. So now we sort of start to get a feeling, and as we sort of go into look, oops, it thinks it's a website. If we go in to sort of look for this, we're going to look for j, I think da, gut. So this is what we're going to look for. We're going to go into the Verb Dictionary. Nowadays we would write this as a root marker, just so you say like there's the verb root. And so we're going to look it up long and low. We're going to look for this da classifier. And we're going to look for j in front of it. So going in here, we'll go down to gut. So we go down, here's gut. And what we learn how to do, this is showing us 0 classifier, S classifier. It should go 0, S, L, S, H. Then it'll start adding on nouns on what we call a thematic prefix or a noun. So then you get ka, ta, j. It's right here, jitagut.
Good.
Attack, or to assault, or to fall upon. So now we've got that verb. So what we do is we sort of just learn how to look for the parts. We say, here's the conjugation stuff. Like we can, there's a couple of things we can do with that. One is start building up, you know, our ability to recognize those things. Kqi and kqwa and kqwa. And then start saying, okay, so you are going to whatever this verb is. So now this is saying attack. So you're going to attack. This in means it's intransitive. There's only a subject. There's no object on there. So tr means transitive. So there's an object and a subject. That means someone does it and it happens to someone. This one is just someone does it. But we'll go look up attack just so we can see. Just it's good practice every time you look up a verb. Like celebrate when you find it, because you're getting better at finding these.
Yeah.
Like, look up the English, right? And yeah, it is. It's a process. It's a whole process. So we're gonna go look up attack just so we can see like what are the sentences they've got here. Ha'itinach ayah yanjiu dekut. They, one attacking force, attacked in our absence. Kate do eat jiu dekut. The dog jumped out at him, like so the dog came to attack him. Then you see there is a plural version as well. And then there's this other for a war party. Like so there's kind of 3 of them. This is the one we are looking for. Then we come back there, and when we come back to here we see, so this has to do with attack. So what this is you are going to attack. Then I think there was one other, find it in the chat. So the other one we had was Abul Khair. So for this one, I would probably just put my dividing line right there and then say, well, that's gotta be the classifier, so this should be what we're looking for. The parts, there should be an in here, maybe something else in there, but then there should be an L classifier of some kind, and then kheu. And then what you'll start to learn, if there's just the letter L, and I might be looking for gle, because the gle, when you don't have this letter I in there, it reverts just to the letter L. So I'm going to go look for something that has something like this. Back to the Verb Dictionary. Oops. Under the, go all the way down to the X underline apostrophe. And then we get this X underline apostrophe E-I-Y. And then here's an L classifier. Here's the letter A in front of it. And also a ya. So there's a, ya, she, e. And then we have encourage, exhort to continue, urge on. Then we have this something yach. We'll go look it up. Now I'll tell you what this ka, yach is doing. So we'll go look up encourage. So here we have it again. And then we see du yach a yach. I encouraged them, told them not to be a coward. I don't know if I'd really say it like that. These days, adyetki yach has awulchaying. They used to encourage the children, urge them. So the way that this verb works is basically to give words of encouragement. And so we're going to learn this verb. This is not a very common verb, but I do think it's a very cultural verb. So in this case, when we say ka yach, this is a possessive pronoun. That is who is getting the encouragement. So in this case, I could say ach yach ayauchecheu. They encouraged me. I yach ayauchecheu. I encouraged you. So that's what that word is. And it has to do with, in some of these stories, they might seem a little weird, but they're not. Like, this is a very cultural thing. When you fish with those wooden halibut hooks, like, you're supposed to tell it these things. Like, you're going to attack it. Like, this is a very cultural thing. You'd say these things to your halibut hook, and then you'd send it way down there to go. Because it's gonna, the halibut's gonna see it, and the halibut's gonna attack it, right? So it's gotta be ready to fight. Those are good questions.
Yeah, I got totally sidetracked on that one because only part I was able to look up was whoosh, which means hole, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe this has something to do with the hole because it's like for halibut story. So I got like stuck on that rabbit hole, and I could never find the right path out of that.
Yeah. And you're going to find this, and you'll find this stuff, and then years from now, you'll look back, you're like, oh, I remember when I would have gotten thrown off by these things. But the more you do this stuff, like this is really looking at the whole language and trying to figure out, like, how do I get into this thing, and how do I start to sort of, you're kind of becoming code breakers in a way. Okay, anything else?
I do have another question, but I'm in Sky to Ooze group, so maybe I'll wait so we don't monopolize with our story.
Yeah, no worries. Anyone else? There's no problem just looking at this stuff. Like, I'm happy to help.
I think I'm with each does about like, I've looked up all the words and then they don't make sense, like piecing them together. And I don't know if it's possible to share like one of them and just show us how to piece it, or help me with that. Let's see. Um, seems. I think this is, well, maybe this is the one that's, I was trying to find talk, and I think I came up with floor, reside on, or is it? So is this saying that the bear is standing up on the floor of the boat? Or,
I think it's just behind him on the upland side.
okay, so how would you find that? Is that something, is that correct that the bear stood up?
Yes,
Okay.
so that's all correct.
Okay.
And-
It's this talk, right? That's the,
And that's one where you have talk, and there's a couple of these where there's a K at the end. So like talk and talk and ache, where that K can sometimes just disappear. And so this, it's a
okay.
bit of a more unusual pattern. It's not highly predictable, but when you're sort of getting, and you're like, you know, as I was going through this one, I was like, man, is that a verb? Do talk? And I was like, no, it's like, it's just behind him, but it's on the upland side. And so I think it has such specific terms for some of these things.
Okay.
But
So
that's,
that, you said that's east?
well, wherever the ocean is, it's upland from the ocean. So, like,
Upland,
he's
okay.
in his boat, and so this is what it's saying. Like, so he gets in his boat, and it's just right there on the upland side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sheesh. Yeah, I was like, floor, where did floor come from? It's amazing how one word's just like, okay, I know this isn't right.
Up somewhere.
Yeah, goodness, geez.
Oh, where was that one? Which story do you have?
That's ridicule totem pole.
Oh, okay. Let me go find it.
Ooh.
That one is not. I don't think that one was documented. Let's see. How did I find? Let's walk through how I found this one. There's a few like there's a few all stars in here. Like the rock sinker, I think is a really good one. That one's, and then the spear with the detachable tip. That's a really good one. Just like in terms of like you don't see those in very many places. That's really fun. So I'm gonna sort of look for when we're getting to this verb. Oh wait, hold on. Let me do the same process here. Stop the share. Copy it. Okay. So we're gonna go through this kind of same process of sort of saying, okay, that's a verb. Like all the parts are there, right? So we sort of take this and we might sort of say, okay, step one would be there's a hand, there's a face, this is a perfective marker, this is the fourth person pronoun, this is the classifier, this is the root. So there's a couple things, like something that you'll learn is when we look at the classifiers, right? So we've got these groups of classifiers. There's the 0 group, the S group, the L group, the SH group. So there's these 4 groups of classifiers, right? So this is all the Lingít classifiers, all of them that are, you know, that each of them have like a plus I version. So you have 0 and ya, sa and si, sha and she, sha and shi. They usually are moving back and forth to simply say the verb has happened. So if it's happened, then you get the plus I version. So we'll sort of put this over here to start sort of just thinking about this stuff a little bit more. So we're going to have these two versions. So we're going to have se and sa, she and shla, oops, she and sha. So what we have here is on the left, these are the ones, oops, I gotta change the order of these. On the left are the ones that are, the classifier is telling you that it has not happened, right? Hasn't happened. The one on the right says, yes, it did happen, right? So that's why it goes plus I. It says, it happened. Yake, it is good. Seti, it is one of those things. Klitzin, it is strong. Karshechit, I did write it. So that's one of the major functions of the classifier. There's also this other thing where sometimes we'll say the zero group and everything else. So I'm bringing this up because of this fourth person pronoun right here. This could be zida, but also if this was just like, it could be that if I said this myself, if I did this, I would say jiyao sida. You might have that, oops, with the W. So where it's actually a si, it's an S classifier, but what this d does is it might push it to add the letter D in there. So that's where you go from si to zi, is because of this. Sometimes it's just because of this d. So I'm bringing that up so that when we go look at it, we might be looking for, what we're probably looking for is j, ya, si, and then I'll put the root marker on there, da. Oops, that should be j. So we're going to go look around for something like this. In the Verb Dictionary, we're going to be, they do segment out these parts. You got j, ya, si, da, and we're looking for that. If we end up going over to Jeff Lear's notes, we're actually going to be looking for this, something like this. So probably in a perfective form, which is what this is in. So step one, let's go to the Verb Dictionary. We're looking for a da. We're going to go see if there's anything there. So here's da. I get yada, sita, kayada, kasada. But there's nothing with j on there. But there is something with an S classifier, which is to flow or run. Maybe, but there's nothing really there to tell us that that's what it's. It has to have that j on there to see. So when you have, there's a couple of things that happened here. So one, if you change the classifier group from this one, we call it 0 now, from ya to si, or in this case, what we'd say now, from 0 to s, that's a different verb. You have changed it to a different verb. Also, if you put one of these thematic prefixes on there, if you put a noun on it, it's a different verb. So that's why these are listed out differently, right? So we're going to go look around. We didn't find it here.
Quick question. I'm just trying to understand this. The ya in that, that's a classifier.
Yes, and so that's why these days we write it as 0, so it doesn't get confused with the face one. Because you'll say
yeah.
ya, da, like right there. Face, classifier, da. So nowadays we'd write that as 0. And we just write them all as, like basically when you get into advanced Lingít, I'll just continue to stress, I'll continue to stress it right now. The classifier has a natural state, which is 0, si, shle, and sh. That's the natural state of the classifier. If you ask me, or sorry, sha, those should all be letter A's. 0, sa, shla, sha. But if you add that letter I, you have changed the classifier because now you're marking it as it has happened. So there's like a little light switch you could turn on. Okay. So let's go look for this. We're looking for, again, j, ya, si, da. So it should look like something j, yao, si, da. So we're going to go into Jeff Lear's verb notes. We're going to go up to the D, DA, we'll just start at the beginning for what has flow here. Let me make this a little bigger. So I'm going to go way up to make sure there's no other da here. So here's these ones that are ending with N. So that's not it, not it. Nukts, that's not it. Sweet, but so then we see duct. Now we start looking, and when you're looking through here, it's a little different because you just got to start scrolling through because it's amazing work, but it's all over the page, right? It's a very free-flowing thing, which is kind of different. But so we see duct. So we're getting ka, dane, Ḳukaháa, Kanadach. The other thing is this is an open root that ends with the A's. That means if it closes, it's going to go to EI. Kadane is Kawada with the N on it, right? So we got Kawada, Kawa, and we're just going to scroll through. We're looking for J, Yao, Se, Da, something like that. Not finding it here. Tides coming in, Nada, Wuda, Kanada, Kawada, Kausada. Well, there's an S. That's kind of something. Starts to cause it to flow. Hinyawada. Yaduct. So that's closing. Wunadage. Let's see. Shadin, Wuda, Ayawada, Yawada. So there's that ka, which is a mouth. All right. Let's see, long one. Yawada, Kayaduct, Kautzada. That's kind of close. Oops. Let's see, Kautzada. A Xerox page for some reason. Wudane, Yawada, Yausada, Yawada, Yautzadai. So here we get Jiyaotzadai, but that's like a different verb. That's D-A-Y. So as we go through here, like we didn't really get it, right? So as we go back through, we might take a look. So we had sort of like causing something to flow, and then we had let's see, Yawada, things that kind of move in the tide, to be like keeping tabs on what someone is saying, keep an eye on, tide went out. And then we go back. So now we sort of got to kind of piece this stuff together. And this is the case where, so you say, awe, at dugu, uwu, awe, at jiyaw dutzada, we ki awe, adach akawa jade. So this is the case where we might sort of have to take a guess on what this verb could be doing. And then we're going to have to sort of take it to a speaker and see. So there are going to be a couple spots in here. So as I sort of put this together, klikiti on a one time, or klikiti on a with one of them, a kikak e ayati wechach. These caches were facing each other, right? Or they're facing it. I don't know. It's kind of a little bit hard to tell. Whoosh kikak would be they're facing each other. If anybody knows, there's whoosh kikak hit, and then you have whoosh ki hit tan, whoosh ki tan, right? So there's another one of those clans that comes out of there. So they're uwu, so they're doing something with these hides. And so this is what I came up with. I think Jiao Dutzada we kli awa adacha kawajake. I think what happened was they put these hides up. So they put these hides up to sort of shield what they were doing. And then you get then whoever it was, a single person, they, him, removed these wool blankets. So then we're kind of left doing a little bit of guesswork. And I'll send this up to some folks who are working with speakers actively and see what they think. But for me, I think they sort of use these, they put up these hides so that so they couldn't be seen. And then they made off with the wool blankets. That's a good one.
I feel better that I wasn't like totally off on that particular sentence, but yeah, the Jiao Dudzida really, I went through a lot of the stuff that you just did, and except for Lear's notes, I haven't used that yet.
Yeah.
And
Well,
just,
there's some undocumented verbs out there. And you know, yeah.
That one took us to the bottom of the halibut hole there. Woo.
Yeah, we
That was
took
a
it.
deep dive.
So why don't we take 5 and we'll come back, see if anyone else has any questions. And we'll just take a look. We're going to shift gears at some point and take a look at something else. There's a couple more things I want to show you with these direction location terms, which is mostly what happens when you start putting a suffix on them. They do change a little bit. Okay, great work, everybody. See you in 5 minutes. Okay. So I think we'll shift gears here and we can always come back and do some more questions. But I do want to sort of get to the end of this presentation on direction and location. So we had kind of talked about these. So here's suffixes that you could put onto things, right? So dach, de, ka, nach, the t, so t and ch. So these ones are very common. Well, I guess I should also have the on here, right? So I usually have that one kind of right here. And then sometimes this one is 0. So it's kind of rare that it's 0, but if something ends with ah, then sometimes it's just sort of, you just don't have anything there. And then this one is like resting at or residing at. It doesn't really need the number. So talking about how these work. So dach, if dach attaches to a vowel, sometimes it'll just become tx. So qudach and qutch are the same thing. You just have this optional contraction like can't and cannot. Rarely it'll turn into just an underlined X. But there's really only like 3 or 4 different situations where that happens. Ah is one of them. A underline X. Off of it or away from it. Okay. Kach is another case, and yach is another case. With these, so dach and nach are closed. So, these three over here on the right don't have a vowel. So we don't have to worry about the vowel stuff. With nach and dach, those are closed with a vowel. They're always high. Dach is always high, nach is always high. They both should always be attaching directly to the noun, right? So hit dach, achidach, achandach, those types of things. De and ka are open, so they should always be the opposite of the preceding vowel. Hit, de, nech, de. Right, so that's how the suffixes work. Right, so dach, de, ka, nach. We will see these as well. All of these can affect the type of motion. And you're going to learn about that later. Like, we don't have to worry about that now, but you're going to have dach, like dach and de and nach. and qa are all a similar type of thing. The T is different than the others. And then this is usually talking about a repetitive motion. Okay. The other thing is we've talked about this one quite a bit. Yeah. So this one appears usually after a verb. If you just have the verb with yeah after it, a lot of times you have this little suffix, but that means the place where that verb happened. Okay? So yeah usually is either the place or the way, the manner in which it happened. The way you can tell which one it is if you just have verby yeah, it's the place where that verb happened. For example, at wugudi yeah, the place where they walked around. Like especially if it's Raven or something, you might have yesh at wugudi yeah, the place where Raven walked around. Maybe that's a place name. Or wutzuduku yeah, cottonwooded place. So here you have wutzuduk would be to have cottonwood trees. And then the yeah is saying the place. And so you're going to see these in both place names and in speech. So if you say adak wutzukiti yeah, the place where they fell, you're going to have stuff like that. Whenever you have yeah. And you could also have like kutuk eat ye degachtu on. We're gonna walk to that place where we pick berries, right? So it can also take a suffix with ye de, ye dach, ye nach, those types of things. That's yeah. If you have ade in front of the verb and then yeah after the verb, now we're talking about the way that verb happened. So you're gonna have ade at wugudiya, the way they walked around. Ade ha'i at dultuya, the way we were taught. Cyril George said that. Ade ha'i at dultuya, the way we were taught. So that's another thing, as especially when you start looking at place names and stuff, you'll see them, but also in stories. You'll see them pop up in stories as well. Any questions about those things? Okay. So let's take a look at some of these really common ones like ka and ya and tu. And look at what happens when you put a suffix on here, right? So when we have that suffix to go from something, you get kadach or kach. Those are your two options. So in both cases, this vowel has gone long and low. Kadach, kach. So you could say nadak kach akawagwat. It rolled off of the table. So this is from the top of, right? You can also have kade to go towards the top of something. So you say, we're going to put it on top of the table. Nadak kade yande gachtuti. We're going to put this onto the table. This one is also used in ceremony. So if you're having ku'ik, there's two important phrases that use day. The first one is if when you're bringing out the first meal, usually before anybody eats anything, you feed the spirits of the ancestors. And you do that by having nakanis. Usually you'll have two of them. Sometimes there's just one. Na kani would be, na is the clan, kani is the in-law. That's usually the person who's hosting the ku'ik. But you might also select someone who does this job, but they're usually opposite clan of those who are hosting. So if it's a wolf or eagle party, there's a crow or raven person who's holding this dish. It's got a little bit of food, a little bit of everything, some tobacco usually, and we're going to hold it up, and we're all going to start thinking of people from the host clan. Not from everybody, just it's usually the host clan. So they'll start naming some of their ancestors. And then you'll say their name, and then I'll write this one out. See, I'll put it over here. So I'm going to put this one up here. So you're going to say their name, and then you're going to say ede, to their mouth. And that's going to push this to go low. So you'll say their name, ede, right? And so usually, like, the way that it usually works is someone's holding that dish and they'll sit there waiting for someone to start calling out names. And they'll say somebody's name, right? They might say, Ḳukaháa, if it's a Łukaháa party. So they'll say, Ḳukaháa, ede. And that means to their mouth. Ede, to their mouth. And that means you're going to offer this food to the ancestors. And you say everybody's name. Usually if the Ḳukaháa is remembering someone specific or some group of people, those will be the last names. And then sometimes people will do them 4 times. Then you will burn that dish, and now everybody can eat. And this is also usually a time when the Ḳukaháa starts turning over to a happier time. The second time you're going to use this in ceremony is when you're killing the money. So then there's a process in the Ḳukaháa where usually you start with what we call jinda'at. So jinda'at are the helping hand, the ones that come to help. So let's say this was a Łukaháa party, a Ḳukaháa. So we would invite up all the other raven clans, the Kiksadi, the Qanachtadi, the Tlínadi, the Yachtetan, and they would come up one clan at a time. And usually folks have an envelope, and in that envelope they have put a dollar amount that they are donating to the party. And the more stuff you want to do, or the higher up in the clan, that better be some big money, right? Like we're talking zeros at the end of it. And I don't think they do it like they used to, but maybe we can. Because in that, there's stories of the 1980s of elders who would go and be like, $5,000, right? And they just drop $5,000 into the dish. So the important thing is you are separating this money from yourself to give it away to your clan in-laws. So usually when you first show up at the Ḳukaháa, you've got an envelope and a pen, and in the envelope is the amount of money you're donating. Let's say I brought $1,000, right? I brought $1,000. Then there would be all these ego people who are close to me, close relatives, who might give me $5, $10, $20, $1. So even though if you're a guest at the Ḳukaháa, a lot of times you're bringing little bits of money to give to those that you're trying to support. Then I would go up, everyone goes up at one at a time, and it depends, it varies from community to community, clan to clan, but they'd announce how much money they're putting in there. And usually they'd say, everybody, you know, Skydu gave me $5, and Gushtihin gave me $20, and you know I would just name everybody who gave me money. And then I'd say, I'm putting in my money, and then maybe I have a younger relative who couldn't make it. They gave me $100 to put in here for them, and then I would put that in and announce what my total was. And usually this is done in front of everybody, because you gotta put up money to talk. That's the old way. So then when all this money is collected, it's all in a big bowl, some big fancy dish. Sometimes it's like a real fancy kind of china piece of, fancy bowl, or it's like a carved wooden bowl. Then we would hold it up and again say the names and say, Kade. Now it's going over these people, our ancestors. And what that means is it's going over them and it's leaving our possession. We are now completely separated from that money, and it should all be given away to those who worked for the Ḳukaháa and those who are our guests. Okay, so that's the day. So again, with this one, with nach, we sometimes see 2 kind of different options. Kanach, with a long, low vowel, and then kanach, where both vowels get flattened. The tone gets lowered. Kanach, kanach. This tone is going to be really important to sort of remember. Kanach, kanach. You could say it either way. This is going along the top of, like going along a mountain, going over a mountain, going over something. And this would include also sometimes flying over the top of it, going over a house or something like that. Cut, so we see the tone not changing, to arrive on, Kawu, to be located at. Nadak kawu, it's on the table. Kuk or ka. So there's a case where that sometimes disappears. So you'd say shingit anika. You'll hear it long, right? Because it's having this extra sort of suffix put on there. Residing on, located on. And then kach, moving about on or repeatedly coming to. Any questions about those? Two more. So now we have ya. And what we'll see if we look at the vowels, ya follows all of the same rules. So we can come back here, we say kadach, kach, kade, kanach, kanach, kat, kawu, kach, ka, kach. If we change all of these K's to Y's, that's what happens here. Otherwise, they're all identical. It's that single switch at the beginning. From the face of, towards the face of, along the face, or passing by. So this one works well for like, you're driving past, like let's say, we're sitting around, I say, let's go to the store. Okay? So we go to the store. But maybe there's something on the radio, it's really good. And then you're kind of not paying attention. You drive right past Ḳukudzi Hoods, Super Bear, which I always mistakenly call Ŝnuksi Hoods. My kids go, we're going to Sugar Bear? You know. Then I'd say, Hundaki hiti yanachya nekuch. You're driving past the store. And so that's what, this is the yanach, to also means going past it. Yet is arriving at the face. So some of you have probably heard, Yak'e yet achashqeini. It's good to look upon your faces. Ye yet achashqeini. Yabu, on the face. Yak or ya, residing on the face. And yach, moving along the face. And just keep in mind, like this one also works for the steep part of a mountain. Any questions on those?
Yeah, Yanaka, it's good to look upon your faces.
Yak'e yet achwashqeini.
Sheesh.
So looking at the diagram that's got the positions on it, all the little parts of words that some of them have a long dash in front of them and the short dash.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just, as you're going through this, it looks like you can just add a short dash part to any long dash part to get a position.
Yeah, so the short dash means, yeah, you can attach that right to a noun. And then, so for these ones, because it's a base, I call it a base because it can take a suffix, right? And if it's called a relational noun, that means that you usually can't add a suffix there. But yeah, it's right on. So yeah, you could take any of those suffixes and add them to any of these bases. And the last one we'll look at is tu, inside of. So this is another one because tu is also in your mind and inside of abstract things, right? So you say tudach or tutch, tude, tunach, tut, tuwu, tuch, tuch. And this one can also be tu. So that's when you say ha tu yeyeti. It goes long because it's this one, where the vowel is just sort of gobbling up this, where that part becomes optional. But this one, if you look at, it tends to sort of, I do think it goes like this. It tends to stay high. This one doesn't like to go low, which is interesting. And then There is something there with tu and tu. Those are two different words, but they are probably related. And then there is a story where they say something like Hasakawa achtu shantuch. Yes, Ausane. They tried to get inside his mind. They were messing around with this little beaver. And then the beaver got mad. Don't mess around with beaver. So let's look at a few place names and just see how these things sort of start looking. And then we might even start taking a preview because we're going to look at this talk story, and I'm going to show you how I'm starting to sort of take some of these stories, and this is an idea that goes back to, I've been working on this story since 2007 with Richard Downhauer, trying to figure out how to create this interactive version of a story, which I'll show you folks. So here's some things, like when we look at how place names work, they show us a lot. And I think a really important thing with place names, a few different things. One, let's start using them. Let's just start. And then also, like, let's start a process of reclaiming the names on our land. But then that also means, like, let's understand how these names work. And then let's make sure that we know how to name things. So that we say, hey, we got this river. Nobody knows what the Lingít name was. Let's make a name for it. Hey, there's this new bird that's hanging out over here. What are we going to call it? Because we can get into compound nouns and find these same types of things that we'll see here. So we've looked at a number of different things that kind of help prepare us to look at these place names. And I'm going to adjust this a little bit smaller. Okay. So I'll say these, and you folks can repeat them. Some of them are not as clear as the others. Jishkat, jishkat, jishkat.
Jilkat.
So that's where the name Chilkat comes from. So there's no a sound in Tlingit. So that should stay should stay long and high. Ťuk'an,
Tlukwan.
ťuk'an.
Tlukwan.
So this is Ḳukaháa, right? So Ḳukaháa is when it converts over to English. And some of these things, I think we can just say, well, it's almost there. Let's just fix the spelling and the pronunciation. So jich is a fish. It's a cache. It's also jich or chush. Both of those words are the same thing. It's just a dialect thing. Hot part, I think it comes from hot, but I'm not exactly sure. Ťuk'an is easier to see. So ťuk is eternal or all the time. On is a village or inhabited land. Ċhathakachhini.
Hini.
Ċhathakachhini.
Hini.
So there's porcupine. Creeks, there's a million things with hini in them all over the place, right? And now you're going to start unlocking all these other pieces so that when you see some place name, you see hini on there, like, oh, what's the part right before it? This name also comes from a verb. So there's ḳha. ḳha is the classifier. Kach is the root. Ḳha is one of these nouns that you could put onto a verb, and it is hair. So the kach is a variation of kats, which is sharp. So ċhathakach literally means sharp hair. Daksha.
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 This is a very foundational concept in Tlingit. Dak, 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 dak. Upland, out to sea. Upland, out to sea. Or inland, right? So you're going to see a whole bunch of things with dak in them. So what happens when you compound this? is that tends to go short. So it's inland, mountain. Pretty
Ah.
straightforward. Oops, I think that's low. Hoot, ah,
Coot,
Ah.
hoot, ah.
Ah.
So this one is, it's also a verb. So there's, I do think the L is a contracted classifier. There's probably like, it pulls it from something else, but it has to do with, there's a big rock outcropping above the lake and it fell into the lake and it flooded the area. So it became the flooded lake, or, the lake that kind of flooded the area. And then is a lake. Ḳukaháa te ye.
Łuakan te ye.
Ḳukaháa te ye.
Łuakan te ye.
So there's like the Ḳukaháa and then the te in its relational form. So deer rock or peacemaker rock. So Ḳukaháa is also a symbol of peace. One time we came, I was with some friends, and we went to Ḳukaháa, and we're talking all kind. We're in a car by ourselves, but we're mad about a few of the things that happened at this Ḳukaháa, and it wasn't none of our clan. It wasn't our Ḳukaháa, and we're just mad talking about, oh, they did this and they did that and blah blah blah. But we weren't doing it publicly. We weren't, we were just venting. But then we saw this deer pop up on the side of the road and look at us, and it shut us right up. Like, we shouldn't have been doing that, but we were kind of fired up. But it is a peacemaker as well. And that also means when there's a Ḳukaháa Ḳuhusti, a ceremony, usually someone embodies the Ḳukaháa. And they have to do there's a dance and they have to not move. And there also can't be anything sharp around them. Also, when you look at names in clans, it's pretty common. Like, let's say it's Clan A and Clan B, and they're fighting. They got some big fight going on, maybe over like a hat, right? Like something happened with a hat got broken, or something happened. Like classic Lingít wars, like they're fought over hats or sometimes broken marriages. So they decide, like, we don't want to fight with each other anymore. So they find someone who's a really good negotiator from a third clan. They come in, talk and say, I'll go talk to these people, then I'll go talk to these people, then I'll sit and think and maybe talk with some other folks, and then come together and get the leaders together from both clans and say, okay, here's what we should do. Here's how we're going to resolve it. You guys are going to do this, you guys are going to do that, you guys are going to stop doing this, you guys are going to stop doing that. And everyone says, okay, sounds good. Now we're all friends again. That person will usually, whoever played the role of the peacemaker, will usually get a name that has a noun in front of it, like Guncha, which is abalone, Ḳukaháa. Tikitkiya Ḳukaháa. So it'll usually be two of those things put together, but you would translate that name as abalone peacemaker, hummingbird peacemaker. So there's another sort of process. Like these are things that I think we need to bring back into practice, because I don't think they're happening anymore.
Question. Te ye is kind of like elaborated from the simple form of the noun. Could you explain that?
Yeah. So you have te, and there is this thing. So there's a set of rules about how to own something, right? You put this I suffix on it. Sometimes it's a U. But if it goes onto a short high vowel, it will always push it long and low. So that's what's going on here. So the same thing, like if there's a rock, I say, hey, that's my rock. And I would say, ach, te ye, and it would go through this exact same process. But it's just about the rules of when we put a suffix onto something, this is one of the few things that changes its shape once you put a suffix on it. Yesh da'achu.
Yes. da'ahu,
Yesh da'ahu.
yesh da'ahu.
So this is from a verb. Da'ah. This means to wrap something up. And it could be in different ways. Like I had these sticks and I just want to tie a rope around it so I can carry them. Or if I've got a present and I'm going to wrap it in paper, those will both be this same verb. So, but it also means like somebody's bundle. So we see again the possessed form of it. Here's raven. There's capital R, trickster raven. The ah. So that's his, it means raven's bundle, but from a longer story is a dry fish bundle. Yeah.
Ḳukaháa,
Yeah.
Ḳukaháa,
Does anybody know what the part is?
That's
Like-
sockeye in fresh water, isn't it?
Yep. Or a coho. So a sockeye or coho change their color when they hit the fresh water. Like so when it turns really red, or a dog salmon does as well. So there is a verb, which means it changed its color, like a salmon, specifically. Only a salmon, not like a chameleon or anything else that might change as octopus, right? It really has to do with those fish. And then ka is a point of land. So what we see in a lot of these place names is this relational suffix. Follows these same rules like as the possessive suffix. I just like to call it relational because it doesn't always show possession. Sometimes it does. Like if I said, Akhdanayi, it's my money. But in these cases, it's just more like a relationship, deer, rock. It's not like the deer owns that rock. Any questions about those?
I had a question about yesh da'ahu. Is that like some specific rocks in Ḳukaháa, or is it like all of them?
It's like like just upriver from the bridge, you got a whole bunch of these big rocks, and that's what those are. Like he was going through there, I think dropped them or something. I haven't heard the whole story. There's a whole bunch of place names around that area, including Ḳukaháa, which is a little bit further south, which is Raven's poop. But yeah,
Is
so
that sorry. Is that a story that's been recorded or written down?
not that I know of, but I'll go try and find it. It might be in some of the recordings that we have, because we got like hundreds of hours of recorded Lingít, which is probably a good time to maybe share. Let me make sure we can find this. So with the break coming up, have a rest, have a break, keep your confidence level high, but try not to do nothing, because if you do too much like break time, then you're going to come in January and you'll be like, okay, what was this thing again? Right? So you don't want to backslide too much, but you also want to just sort of have some time to relax, because we go, I think, pretty hard with this stuff. Like it's a lot, and we get into some big concepts and some big sort of things that we're sort of looking at. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But I want you folks to know, let's see. Where do I have this? I think it's up here. So I think if we click on this one, let's see. Now you have access to 240 different tapes that's all recorded Lingít. And what I'll do, I want to show you folks another thing, and I'll put this on our class webpage tonight. Let me pull it up real quick. So I want you to know that you can download a whole bunch of audio. And this audio is for us to study Lingít. And I want to make sure that you have opportunities to listen to things. So part of the process would be going through, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I can see it. So this is how this stuff works. So this is an itemized list of what's in the Dowenhauer collection, which is these 500 tapes that were recorded by or collected by Ḳukaháa Nora Marks Dowenhauer and Ḳukaháa Richard Dowenhauer. And so if you go through here, Sealaska Heritage Institute had a project that was managed by Zach Jones. And what they did was they hired some speakers to just listen to 500 tapes and write down a summary of what they heard. So you can go through here and it says, here's Mosquito, Strongman, published in Ḥukaháa. Here's Frank Dick Sr. from Yakutat. So these are Yakutat recordings. This is also Yakutat, Angoon, Esther Johnson, Yakutat. So you can sort of scroll through here and you could look at stuff. You could probably also do a search on here. I gotta make this a little smaller. And let's try Wushkitan. So if I hit Wushkitan, then I can go through, hey, this is my great grandpa right there. But here's Sun House. I can just sort of click through. Here's Wushkitan, George Jim. It's all in Tlingit. Oral history of the Great Flood, how people went to the mountains, Tlingit Law, return to Yak. You could just sort of browse through and get an idea of what's in here. So here's some Tlingit who died at Latuya Bay. Here's Sitka. Here's the flood. We can go further. Here's story of how an unmentioned animal monster swallowed an icht and took them to Tsimshian country, right? So tons of stuff, tons and tons of stuff in here. How a family member killed at Lemon Creek by a brown bear. Okay, so Berners Bay, like here's a whole bunch of local stuff, right? And so here's what you could do. So you go through, it says item 110, but what you're looking for is the tape number. Tape 92, side B. So then we'll go back into here. Where'd it go? Oh. Here it is. So now we go, here's tape 91 to 120, and then we go down, tape 92, side A, side B, and this was, if we go back to the notes, was side B. So now you can go to side B, I can hit download, and now I have this whole recording. Now it is quite likely all of it is in Lingít, so it's not like you're going to be able to just listen to it and you should enjoy it, but you're going to have to start immersing yourself into these deep waters as well. And that means you're probably going to have to pick one of these and listen to it 100 times, right? I mean, your brain will do a lot of that work for you, but you don't always have to just go right to the undocumented stuff as well. So if you go to, another way to do this would go to resources, and down to audio. And if you scroll down, let's see, to the Dowenhauer collections, pretty far down the page. But here are the stories from Ḥukaháa. So here is Ţaqa, which we're going to listen to tomorrow, Mosquito, Duktut, dark skin or the strong man, Ḥukaháa, the woman who said something to offend the bears, Kants, which was a man who married a bear, Ţukaháa, the glacier flowed over people, and then the first white man. Then we got a couple other things. There's a raven book. So some of these have the text right underneath it. These ones, they're from like this one does and this one does. And then tomorrow we're going to look at a different way to sort of do a, like take one of these stories, listen to it, and then sort of start looking at it and identifying all of the parts that we might be able to see there, which is also another thing you can do. Like, so if you're wondering how to keep studying Lingít, one of the next phases is like really getting into these stories, committing them to memory, diving into the text, and then also, so since for some of these, like if you look at something like Ţankha, you have the English here, or sorry, the Lingít here, and the English over there. So you might say, well, can I translate this? Because I've got the answer right there. Can I do it? Can I find out what every single one of these words are? Awe, we, ach, my, yagu. There's the possessed form of ya. Yikt, located, at inside the boat. Guide, you desagen. It used to be called guide. A yikt, inside of it. Awe, atnacha kuch. I boated, or I boat all over the place. I boat around. Asqewu, seining. So then you can sort of start doing some of this work yourself. And some of this, there, for some of these, we are in the process of retyping. Like, I think all of Hashuka and all of Hatua Nagoyis should be retyped specifically for language learners. So we could basically have, here's a column, here's a column, here's a column, there's a blank column in the middle for you to do some of that work. And go through here, find the verbs. There's a verb, there's a verb, there's a verb, there's a verb, there's a verb. And then what are all the other things, right? So here's a verb, right? And then start looking for these directional things. Yikt, yikt, enach, through the mouth, right? And nach, that's how that one works. Ya, awe. And so just sort of going through and doing some of that stuff. Achji yewuti, it was in my possession. So that's kind of, I think, a good next step for you folks. And to know, there's also, I'll show you folks one other thing that is here. So let's see. I think we're going to go to, this one is called Lingít Ḳukaháa. And so some of this stuff isn't translated. And I'll tell you what. My philosophy is to just put it all out there for the language learning community to go find and use. Not everybody agrees. Some of this stuff falls under copyright law and other stuff, but if I don't translate it, who will know? So Lingít is Lingít movies. So if you click on here, this will take you to another folder. This has a whole bunch of stuff, like there's a bunch of stuff I have filmed, and so these are elders that I recorded, especially if you look under Ḳukaháa. SHI, there's some videos under SHI. There is this video for Hashagun, which was a project in the interior where they recorded a whole bunch of inland speakers, and there's a few of those videos in here. So there's also videos, and not all of these have subtitles either, but they're, I think they're wonderful. So just more stuff to kind of think about, look at, explore. You've got a month to rest and to also make sure that Lingít is around you. It is your responsibility to make sure that you're staying somewhere near the language. Definitely get some rest. Not yet. Still got one more week. But after that, get tiny kind rest, but then also just make sure that it's real easy to just not have Lingít around you. So you're the one who has to sort of put it around you. I want you to know there's lots of tools out there, and we're going to sort of, I'll be in touch over the next week about possibilities of getting together virtually, sometimes in person over the break, to make sure that we have chances just to visit and not have a lot of pressure to like do assignments and stuff, but just to make sure that we're sticking with it. Because there's a small community, but it's a growing community of learners. And I think the ones who always put it around themselves, they're the ones who I think go on to become speakers. Anything before we go?
Yeah, going back several minutes to yeh da'achu. Can that be broken up and like the da'achu mean in terms of wrapping around? Could you use that to describe like wrapping Christmas gifts?
Yeah.
And then okay, so da'achu could be used in that way to describe. All right.
And it is also here. So here's in this case, like da'ach would be a bundle, but it comes from a verb. And so when you put an S classifier in it, that means somebody is bundling it or wrapping it. So this would be, da sa'ach, wrap it up. And so that could mean tie a string around it so it bundles together. Like if you're carrying like some tent poles or sticks or whatever, firewood, you need to wrap it up. But this would also work for a present, right? So then you could sort of learn how to do this stuff, right? So you could say, so the da is built in there. And it is one of these thematic, and this is a case where they're not always nouns, which is why we call them thematic prefixes, which is this is the thing for around or about. It's the exact same word. So that's why you have da'ach to bundle it around it. And so you could say adasa'ach, oh wait, let's do this one. Adawsa'ach. They bundled it up or wrapped it. And then you could say dawsa'ach, I wrapped it up or I bundled it.
So I was as you're continuing to talk and having Lingít around us, I was trying to imagine how I would construct saying I have Lingít wrapped around me. Would that also include some kind of reflexive component?
Yeah. So and you could probably say chush da. So chush da would be around the self, right? So you could say chush da. And you'd probably say chush da yechsadne gaha yuchatangi. I put our language around myself.
Oh, geez.
And that's also often is shta. So you hear that as well. Shta, like around yourself. Like I walk around with my kids sometimes. And like sometimes kids, they don't watch where they're going. They're just like say like they got like a new toy sword or something. They're just like, ah. I'd say shta ani stein. Look around yourself, right? So it's like keep it because there's a negative phrase which is keshta awushtain, which is they weren't keeping an eye on their surroundings, which is also like another metaphor for like not even being aware of what's going on. Yikecha Johan, Yiguaya Juan. So class tomorrow, no class Thursday, and last gathering 1 week from today. And what we'll do for that is you'll just show us what you came up with. Just show us what you came up with, and then I'll have the answer key. Potentially, like this is what I think it was. But great work. Keep it up. Folks are awesome. Awesome.
Sheesh.
Yeesh.
Yikecha.
Sheesh.
Ah.
Ḳukaháa.
Ah.
I